What does it mean to think in Spanish? Can someone really think in a different language? For the longest time, this subject confused me. What does it mean? Can I do it? Does it happen automatically, or is it something that you have to study? Well, to think in another language shouldn't be something that scares you. All that it means is that you're not translating in your head as you're speaking. And today, we're gonna go through 2 exercises to improve your ability to speak and to think in Spanish. Hey everyone, and welcome to Anytime Español. I'm Jeff. I think for me, I didn't really understand how to think in another language, or probably what it was is that I didn't give it the importance that I should have. And I probably studied Spanish for about 10 years before I even started these types of exercises that help you to think in Spanish. So the sooner that you can do it, the better. Okay, our first exercise is to learn new words by images and by context. Now, what does that exactly mean? Ever since high school, I've tried to learn something like the word chair. And I would learn chair is a silla. Okay, chair, silla. Got it. No, I didn't. I could never remember this word. I probably had to study it, flashcards, things like that. But if you can alter the way that you learn, like in this exercise, what you want to do is picture the image of a chair or a chair in real life. And you don't ever actually even want to think chair. And when you see that, you think silla. Once we do that, you want to immediately use this new word in 4 to 5 sentences to reinforce this new structure. I see silla in my head and I think, esta silla es grande. Hay 4 sillas alrededor de la mesa, pero necesitamos una silla más. Las sillas en la casa de mi abuela son antiguas. So you see how we never want to think or talk about the word chair. We're always keeping the word sillas in mind and using examples to kind of put that word into context to remember it. Let's try it with an action like correr. So how are we supposed to visualize something that's not a noun? Well, we can visualize an action. So we never want to think of the word to run. We want to put in our minds the image of or action of somebody running. And that's how we can think of correr. Esta acción es correr. A mi hermano le encanta correr. Él corre en muchas carreras. De hecho, él va a correr en una carrera este domingo. O mi hermano y yo acabamos de correr. But what happens when we have a new word that we want to learn that doesn't have an action or it's not a noun? It's just kind of an idea like sobre todo, which means above all or mainly. Well, if we can't give something an image, we can certainly give it context. But even with this, we don't want to think of above all or mainly specifically and then translate that it means sobre todo. We want to think of the idea, mainly or above all. Okay, let's put it with context. Me gustan todos los días festivos, sobre todo la Navidad. Nos gusta toda la comida mexicana, sobre todo los tacos al pastor. Las elecciones son muy interesantes, sobre todo cuando tienen debates. Mi novia es baja, amable y sobre todo bonita. So whenever you try to learn something new in Spanish, try this method. Okay, good. So this may seem like something that's very just simple, but it really is effective when learning anything new in Spanish. Visualize, don't translate, and immediately put it in context to reinforce. By the way, if you're enjoying this video, please give us a like and subscribe if you haven't already. Thanks. Okay, exercise 2 is, I don't know if this is something that anybody's ever read or anybody else has ever done. This is just something that I personally do, which is you're taught in high school and college when you learn Spanish that if you don't know a word, you can ask como se dice. But to me, this is a terrible thing to do because you're immediately sort of giving up or taking yourself out of thinking in Spanish. This is a great opportunity to stay in the language and keep speaking Spanish. And a lot of people will ask, well, how am I supposed to keep speaking Spanish when I can't think of the word? And this is where if you're failing with a word, you're gonna be stuck when you're trying to talk going, you have to think of this one word, but language doesn't have one word to say something. So if you can't think of a word, describe it. If you can't think of an action or something that you want to say, talk around it, talk about it. The other person, if they're speaking with you, is going to help you and usually say the word to you. Let me give you an example. If someone were to ask me, ¿en qué trabajas? And maybe I just can't think of the word in that moment, or I actually never learned the word for software engineer, I can at least, well, I can explain it. Pues es que nunca he aprendido esa palabra, pero trabajo en una oficina, trabajo con computadoras, programo las aplicaciones. The person is gonna say, ingeniero de sistemas? Eso. Soy ingeniero de sistemas. Another example would be if you're telling a story about what you were cooking yesterday, and of course you know that olla is pot, but for some reason you just can't think of it in this moment. Instead of stopping yourself and having the person wait for 5-10 seconds while you try to remember what this word means, just simply try to talk around it. Es que es redondo y pones comida para calentarlo y cocinarlo. La persona va a decirte que es una olla. And this can work with things that aren't exactly objects like emotions, or the other day I was talking about happiness and I just couldn't think of the word feliz, but I also know the word contento, alegría, le da gusto. So there are lots of times where instead of getting stuck on a certain word or a certain idea, simply just use another. You're expressing the same thing. Remember, language is all about expressing yourself, and don't get so tied up on the details. It definitely becomes a lot more fun. And I feel like when I start talking, knowing that I'm not gonna get stuck on a word, and if I do, I'll just immediately start talking around it, describing it, anything that you can do, you find that you actually begin to start talking much more fluently without so many breaks and pauses. But tell me in the comments, do you think in Spanish or do you translate word for word? Do you have other advice to think in Spanish that might help our community? Let us know and watch this video to better your Spanish. Until next time.